The rain tapped gently against the hospital windows as Emma pushed the food cart down the corridor, her white shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. A nurse for over 6 years, she had always gone above and beyond for her patients. She stayed late. She listened when no one else had time. And she never ever let protocol stop her from showing kindness. Today was no different. Mr. Thompson, a lonely veteran in room 214, hadn't eaten in 2 days. He wasn't on Emma's assigned wing, but she knew something wasn't right. She checked his chart, saw nothing alarming, and took it upon herself to bring him warm soup and sit by his side until he finished every spoonful. As she adjusted his pillow and gave him a reassuring smile, a sharp voice cut through the quiet room. Emma Reynolds, "What do you think you're doing?" She turned. It was Ms. Cartwright, the new floor supervisor. Known for her icy demeanor and strict rules, Cartwright had made it clear on day one, no crossing departments, no bending protocols. "I'm just feeding Mr. Thompson," Emma replied calmly. "That's not your patient. You're in violation of policy." Again, Emma stepped back, heart thudding. He hadn't eaten. No one came. "That's not your concern. Report to HR." By the end of the shift, Emma's badge was deactivated. No goodbyes, no warnings. Just cold papers slid across a desk and a security guard escorting her out. She stood outside, rain soaking through her scrubs, stunned. Her entire career gone in one afternoon. She didn't call anyone, not her friends, not even her brother. But halfway across the country, Staff Sergeant Daniel Reynolds was just finishing training new recruits when his phone buzzed with a message: "Emma got fired today for helping a patient." He stared at the screen, and without a second thought, he packed his bag and called his commanding officer. "Sir," he said with calm resolve, "I need emergency leave. It's time someone reminded that hospital what real service looks like." Daniel's boots hit the pavement outside the hospital 2 days later. His posture was crisp, uniform sharp, and expression unreadable. The guard at the front desk stood a little taller when he approached, sensing the authority he carried without needing to flash a badge. Inside, the hospital bustled with its usual rhythm, nurses rushing between rooms, carts rolling down hallways, intercoms buzzing overhead. No one paid attention to the Army staff sergeant walking past them, except one young intern who did a quick double-take and whispered, "Is that guy military? Daniel found the HR office easily." The woman behind the glass window looked up and froze when she saw him. "I'm here regarding Nurse Emma Reynolds," he said flatly. I'm sorry, sir, but only authorized personnel are allowed. I'm her brother, and I'm not leaving until someone explains why she was kicked out for doing what nurses are trained to do. Help." Before she could reply, Ms. Cartwright herself appeared. Her expression tightened when she saw Daniel. "You must be Sergeant Reynolds. I understand your frustration, but your sister violated protocol." Daniel didn't blink. "Your protocol failed a patient. She didn't. That's not for you to decide." He stepped forward, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "Let me tell you something. In the Army, we have rules too. But when someone's hurting, when someone needs help, you act. That's not weakness. That's leadership." Cartwright crossed her arms. "This isn't the military, Sergeant. No, it's a hospital, a place where people are supposed to be cared for. And if kindness gets you fired here, then maybe it's your system that needs reviewing." Behind him, a few staff had started to gather, overhearing the exchange. A doctor paused mid-stride. A janitor slowed his mop. Daniel looked around and raised his voice slightly. "My sister was dismissed for feeding a veteran who was ignored. Not stealing meds, not skipping protocol to slack off, but because she cared too much." Cartwright's eyes darted to the small crowd. She looked uncomfortable now. Daniel leaned in one last time. "You can bury her under paperwork, but now the story's out, and I'm not done." He turned and walked out without waiting for a reply. Outside, Emma sat in the passenger seat of his truck, not expecting him so soon. When she saw his face, she sat up. "Danny, what did you do?" "He started the engine. Made some noise. We're just getting started." News travels fast in small towns, and when an army sergeant walks into a hospital and challenges a supervisor in front of staff, it travels even faster. By morning, Daniel's speech was already making rounds on social media. A young nurse had filmed the entire encounter from behind a medicine cart. She uploaded it with the caption "Nurse fired for feeding a veteran." Her army brother wasn't having it. Within hours, the video was shared across Facebook, Instagram, and even landed on a few news aggregator sites. The comment section flooded with outrage. She did what any good nurse would do. This hospital should be ashamed. Where can we donate to help Emma? Back at Emma's apartment, she sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through the flood of messages on her phone. Her hands trembled. "I don't understand. I was just doing my job." Daniel sipped coffee at the table nearby, already reading through emails from reporters and military contacts. "You did more than your job," he said calmly. "You reminded people what it means to care." A loud knock interrupted them. Emma opened the door to find an older man in a military cap and leather jacket. He stood tall despite his cane, and his eyes were firm. "Are you Emma Reynolds?" "Yes, I'm Colonel Harris, retired. I served with Mr. Thompson, Vietnam." Heard what happened, he looked over at Daniel. "And you must be the brother who stirred the hornet's nest." Daniel gave a nod. "Good work." "But now it's time we do more." Emma blinked, unsure. "What do you mean?" The colonel handed over a manila envelope. Inside were signatures, hundreds of them. Veterans, nurses, citizens. People who know what you did was right. "We're taking this to the hospital board." "You won't stand alone, Miss Reynolds." Emma's eyes welled up. She had spent the last 48 hours questioning everything, her choices, her career, her worth. But now, standing before her were total strangers ready to fight for her. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Told you we were just getting started." And as the colonel sat down at their kitchen table, unrolling more papers and calling more names, Emma realized something she hadn't seen before. This wasn't just about a job anymore, it was about a principle, and she wasn't just a nurse. She had become a symbol. The hospital board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, closed doors, tight security, and more tension than usual. But what they didn't anticipate was the line of people stretching from the building's entrance down the block, veterans in uniform. Nurses holding signs, former patients holding photos. Even local reporters were camped outside with cameras rolling. The hashtag number sign "Justice for Emma" had exploded online. What started as a quiet protest had grown into a full-scale community stand. Inside the boardroom, the mood was stiff. Suits lined the table, murmuring about protocol, reputation, and damage control. At the end of the room sat Cartwright, trying to keep her expression composed. The door opened and Emma walked in with Daniel at her side. She wasn't in scrubs, just a plain blue blouse and her hospital ID, which she refused to stop wearing. "Miss Reynolds," began the chairman, "we've reviewed the incident. While we understand your intentions, crossing department lines was a serious breach of policy." Emma stood straight, her voice calm. "And what about the patient who hadn't eaten for 2 days? What policy covers his suffering?" There was silence. Colonel Harris, seated behind her, rose with a folder in hand. "I represent over 2,000 veterans and citizens who signed a petition in support of this nurse. Many of them former patients here. I'd like to read a few of their statements." The chairman hesitated. "Colonel, this meeting is internal. No disrespect, but your internal decisions became a public matter the moment you fired someone for being decent." He opened the folder. One veteran writes, "She held my hand during chemo when my own family couldn't come. I wouldn't be alive without her." Another voice joined from the back, Mrs. Thompson, the veteran's wife. Her voice cracked with emotion. "My husband wouldn't have eaten if it weren't for her. He trusted her. That should count for something." Eyes around the room began to shift. Even some board members looked down, uncomfortable. Daniel stepped forward. "You say she broke rules. Maybe so, But rules without heart make cold places, and hospitals aren't meant to be cold. He laid down a copy of the military's Field Leadership Manual Care. Duty, compassion. These aren't just army values, they should be yours too. Cartwright's lips tightened, but she said nothing. The chairman finally spoke. "We'll recess for deliberation." As the board left the room, murmurs rose behind Emma. But this time they weren't whispers of shame. They were murmurs of hope.